Every now and then, a billionaire is going to let their mask slip and let us know what they really think about us. And recently, Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, did us a favor and revealed what he really thinks about us. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Sam Altman is the guy that is such a savvy businessman that he thinks it's perfectly reasonable that a company that's generated $13 billion in revenue is justified in asking for $1 trillion in funding. That's a real math major right there. Sam Altman was recently speaking at an event in India, and he was challenged on the energy consumption of AI and AI data centers. And for those who aren't paying attention, the amount of energy and resources that AI consumes is astronomical. In fact, when you look at one of the more recent data center builds that's happening in South Texas, the amount of energy that that one data center will use exceeds the total energy used in 38 different states. Now, think about that. When one data center can consume more than the totality of an entire state, that gives you a view of how excessive the consumption is and how damaging these data centers are to the environment. And there's tons of those data centers that are being floated as projects all across the country. So that gives you an idea of the consumption that we're staring down the barrel of. And the key thing to keep in mind is that we, as the average citizen, are going to be the ones that bear the brunt of that cost. It's not these billionaires, it's not these billionaire companies. Those are all subsidized and they get handouts from the government to destroy the environment and make everything more expensive for us. That is what these billionaires are actively pushing. They're actively pushing their AI Ponzi scheme as a way to consolidate and hoard even more resources, while at the same time making resources more scarce for the average person in the US and around the world. Now, that brings us to Altman's answer when pressed on justifying the massive amount of resources that AI chews up. His response to the question was to downplay it and reframe it in these terms. Think about how many resources it takes for a single human to get smart. You're talking about 20 years of resources being invested into a single human for them to get to the point where they're competent at anything. What does that statement tell you about Altman's view of the average person? He views the average person as a net drain on society and purely consumption oriented. There is no benefit to feeding the average human because to feed that average human takes away resources that could be spent on his AI platform and infrastructure. And that gives you the exact window that we all need to understand when it comes to how these billionaires think. These billionaires look at each and every one of us as consumables. We offer very little value to the world, and all we do is consume resources. And when you think about things that way from their point of view, it makes perfect sense that their best bet is to invest all sorts of resources into AI because it's those AI investments that are going to pay their bottom line faster and bigger than any single person could. What's interesting when you look at that consumption argument is what doesn't get discussed. You know what isn't being discussed in the consumption conversation? How many resources are billionaires consuming on a day-to-day basis? If we want to think about conservation of resources and making sure that the world is better off, doesn't it make sense that we eliminate the biggest consumers of resources on the planet? And the biggest consumers of resources on the planet are the billionaire class. You have 3,000 people roughly all around the world who are hoarding and consuming resources at a scale never before seen in history. And while they're doing that, you're seeing people all around the world have their quality of life and their standard of living get worse and worse. So, if we want to make the world a better place for the vast majority of us, and we're looking at conserving as many resources as possible, it's not enough to stop the advance of these data center builds and all of this AI investment. We need to cut the heads off the snake. And when we're talking about that, that means eliminating the billionaire class, because there are no bigger parasites, no bigger consumers than the billionaire class, because it's the billionaire class that is directing the millionaire class, that decisions need to be made on who is worthy of existing and who isn't. And when you're answering that question from the perspective of the millionaire class and the billionaire class, everyone that isn't in their club doesn't deserve to exist. That's the message that they're sending you. So when we look at things like what Sam Altman says, we need to be thankful that they're saying this stuff out loud, because it gives us a window into how they really think, and it creates the opportunity for us to act in a way where they can be removed from the board so that all of us can have a better future going forward.